What's happening? Damien Maher, we're back.
I know. It looks like I'm prolific now. This is like two. This is like two more than what I've probably done before. So yeah, it's an interesting experience, and it's good to have the conversation. We've had many chats about exercise and thoughts in the industry along the way. But
yes, we might as well get it on camera now. And that's all.
Yeah, well, you might be a bit more prolific in expressing your opinion. I would be more in the backgrounds and developing thoughts, and probably more reluctant to, not to say anything about, but express an opinion than a lot of people in the industry, because I'm thinking about there's so many possibilities of where I'm wrong, as opposed to I watch social media and there's a lot of naivety in terms of questions. They're not even aware of which questions to ask when they look in sort of things here. This is the way, and I'm like, well, who are we talking about when you mention that? Like, what was that person look like in your head? Was there a demographic? Was there an age? Was there a limb length? Was there proportions of those limbs from one area? So my shin bone is pretty short, and my femur is pretty long, and my torso is very short. My brother, who's the exact same height as me, has a longer shin bone, a shorter femur, so leg bone, and a torso that's pretty matching. And he squats down a certain way, and it looks pretty. My squat knows something like that.
Yeah.
And there's an element, you could say, genetics. Well, we're coming from the same family tree, but the proportions are different. So our ability to fold up in a deep squat, so to say, in this example, is totally different.
And you were going to courses, obviously, that they're telling you to squat ass to grass, and
yeah, I'd gone through that journey, and I appreciate where the young coaches that are online, they're not telling you something that's wrong, they just don't know. And so what happens is they become information dispensers.
yeah,
They're regurgitating what someone else said to them that they held in high esteem and held up on the podium, and said this person obviously said this is the way. And so I learned from a lot of mentors, and the interesting thing about, in terms of, I learned from a business mentor, because when you start off in the industry, you be trying to become good at your craft, and then you might start to understand business. What's happening is a lot of people are starting off on their journey and immediately are told they need to go out and work on their own, and they're independent, and they're online trainers.
yeah,
And one of the mentors I used to look at years ago was, a fellow called Keith Cunningham, in terms of, he's the original Rich Dad from the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, if you're not aware.
Yeah.
Kiyosaki is not the Rich Dad.
yeah,
But there is a part where these people are learning information and portraying it out to people, and they're learning from someone else who learned it from someone else who learned it. So it's the case of the Chinese whisperer. So Keith had a great saying before, and said, Damien, there's two types of hay. There's the hay before it goes through a horse, and there's the hay after it goes through the horse. So be wary of which type of hay you're going to be eating. So the trainers at the moment might have great intentions, and they want to share this information and share it to the world, because now it's their religion. They've got a side, and this is the side I'm on. I'm going to share it. I'm going to share this message out to people, not probably aware of where they might be limitations in that information and who it might be suitable for. And from not getting good competence themselves, they've suddenly switched to studying marketing. So the more they study marketing, they become better at sharing the message that they know less and less to more and more people.
And then the problem is, obviously, the people that may listen to this podcast, they're trying to obviously do their due diligence around what's best for them with training, nutrition, and then they're getting fed this. I even look on my old posts where I used to have team ass to grass, and
we've all worn that part, and before it's because we become influenced by a guru,
yeah,
and we feel that we're not competent enough to question the guru. And the thing differently today, Sean, is most of the coaches that are starting off, I'd started on the journey probably 1999. Okay, now for those of you who weren't aware, there wasn't really an internet around then, or it's a bit like the Homer Simpson, the internet, that thing's still around. So I have audio cassettes of what I bought to purchase, because the only people that could dispense information and knowledge at that time were people who were actually suitably qualified, because you would have no podcast to express your information. You would have to go to a publisher or someone to produce your material, either an audio cassette, video cassettes, probably something else you have to Google, guys. There's two things you're Googling, especially the young coaches. But you had to have someone and actually have knowledge before you could dispense it out to the public. What happens now is, not to say anything about you, Sean, but I'm looking at this setup here. I'm like, man, I'm on the set of Joe Rogan. I made it, man. I made it. So what we have is people, there's no pre-qualifications in order to dispense information to the public. And if you are someone that wants to change your shape and you're eager to do this, and again, is you're influenced by social media and these people, it becomes the biggest filing system of exercises. And the problem basically is that when I'm looking at it and going, man, that exercise for that person versus these set of criteria of the rules of exercise of how they should be done, I'm like, the rules? The external rules. Oh, the bar must hit my chest. Maybe if you're a powerlifter, but if I extend my arms and I pull them back down, I'm 2 or 3 inches from my chest. Yes, give me 100 kilos. That bar is going to hit my chest, but that's gone beyond what I could actively bring up myself. But in order to count, to say I benched 100 kilos, in order to get a few likes on Facebook, a few pats on the back and go, look at me, man, I'm so great. I have this external performance. Tom Purvis is a great guy from RTS in resistance training specialist in Oklahoma.
Now, before you go into this, I just want to be clear in everyone what your demographic of people you train is, because that is important. It's easy to maybe train 20 somethings and you can smash them into the ground with bad technique, but who are you dealing with? That's the difference.
So my sort of niche area, Sean, who I focused on coaching, were people who wanted to be fit 40 and beyond. I was over 40s, like 50. I mean, I'm mid 40s myself, because again, I was that guy that was bulletproof in his 20s and 25s and squatting ass to grass and playing sports and probably playing 5 games, and equivalent of what you would have over here, the AFL, in Gaelic and soccer in all different age groups, men's from even young, and I was battering my body. But there's a reason the military look for young soldiers, because they get shot and they get back up again. But when you start going like late 30s, 40s, you start paying the price for all the stupid shit you did when you were younger. And the people listening, when they're watching it and they're bouncing off the joints and saying, yeah, cool. The study is still in its early infancy. I want to see the study and the impact of the exercise you're doing in 15 to 20 to 30 years time. Because I have clients I've trained for 20 years. So I'm watching how the impact of the decision making of the choice of exercises, the choice of external load, like stupid things you did before, how might that have impacted their body over time?
And not only that, what is the other kind of experience where we're talking with stupid exercise on your own body training, the surgery you had to have?
Oh yeah, I mean, as I said, it's like you start off and you look in terms of time. Ian King is an Australian coach, and he had a few sayings that sort of resonate with me. It was time magnifies dysfunction. Yeah. And he had a saying that little leopards become big leopards and big leopards kill. So this little niggle that someone has and they're ignoring it and they're playing on, and we're out walking today, and like I'm saying, watch his hip, look at his leg, look at this here. Yeah. Everybody's got a pain. Not to be an ambulance chaser, like I could go around with a business card and probably go up to your man and say, how's your pain in the left side, dude? Is it sore? Has it been sore long? Yeah. But I played professional sport, I played semi-professional sport, I played multiple sports, and then I entered into the gym to try and make myself better, because I felt that, you know, there was parts in professional sport that I wasn't being exposed to, exercise, proper strength training, whatever, and I did it, and I felt like from my 20s that I felt, man, I'm not jumping as high as I used to do, and then I was like, okay, maybe I need to do this, maybe this, and I would train and push harder, and eventually my ability to do certain exercises started to decrement. I started having a little niggle in my hip, and that sort of expanded over time. And then I would limit certain exercises, and again, you'd have the gurus, a man is not a man unless he can deep squat ass to grass, and
so you're going to these courses with a little niggle and they're just telling you to keep pushing.
Yeah, no real cognitive assessment, no real, it was do the basic exercise, the compound exercises. These are the biggest bang for your buck. Every little soundbite you can get, and it said, well, you got to squat ass to grass, and say, well, I'm good to squat ass to grass, just don't cut the grass for maybe 10 months. Yeah. Then I might be okay, you know what I mean? And then they would say, these are the rules, the feet must be here. And from even I started off in exercise to music and body pump and body balance and all this sort of part, because you guys that are new in the industry, that was the only way you got a job working in the gym. You had to teach classes. Yeah. You had to have a background of exercise to music. But again, is if we look at that Les Mills program, It's exercise choreography. It's not training. It's you're telling me my feet should be like, you know, slightly turned out, hip distance apart, just slightly out. The bar must turn here, and my hands are at this distance, travel from here to here. It is, everyone is an external, that everyone is coming out and being the same. And so my body had deteriorated, and I had started off, like when I began the journey, started studying off sports massage, neuromuscular therapy, started studying osteopathy, started studying with chiropractors, started studying RT. I went through a whole thing from all the fascia guys to all of them, and to try and fix myself. And the problem basically being is I would come up with some ideas to fix myself, but when you're on the inside of a jar, you can't read the ingredients that are on the outside.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of people try to do it, training themselves, and they say, cool, you're
Can't
going to
see
do
your
it.
own backswing.
Can't see your own backswing. Can you smell your own breath?
Yeah.
No, but I smell your breath, dude.
Yeah.
You've lost the
Yeah.
smell of your breath, but I can smell it. You can't see it. So, long story made even longer, I still was trying to fix something, but I did so much stupid stuff earlier in the time that it changed the structure of my joints, which changed the function of my joints. And although you hear the snack, crackle and pop initially and you don't feel the pain, there's a reason why. You haven't gone down enough layers to get to the sensitivity parts of the bone that give you that what's called a nociceptor, pain receptor. There might be things called mechanoreceptor that monitor movement, but you're altering movement over time to still stay in the game of the sport or the exercise.
You're working around the nickel and you're
all of it, ignoring it, and you have the signal. It's been going on. You're driving the road and you're in the car and there's a noise coming from the engine and you go, I know what I need to do. Turn up the volume on the radio. Can't hear you. And then someone's going on, pull over, and you go, can't see you. And you keep going along, and eventually I came to a stage where it was like I basically had a number on the wall for probably 2 years. A guy I was coaching, very familiar in terms of orthopedic and that sort of parts, gave me an X-ray, like to go get an X-ray. Ignored it, tried to fix everything myself, and then eventually I knew by the time I went in for the X-ray and the consultation and all with the orthopedic surgeon, it was your head's on the block. And he said, like, you're entering a new stage of your life, and you know, we probably have to look at changing the hip
replacement.
And I said, what would that look like? What would I be able to do? And he says, you'd be able to walk, swim and cycle. And I said, will I be able to play football or lift weights? He goes, no, I wouldn't recommend any of that. I said, dude, you sound like a panty liner commercial. I'll be able to walk, swim and cycle. I says, am I riding horses? Am I doing all like the ads? And it's like, went to him and I said, right, I need other opinions. And I probably interviewed maybe 5 other surgeons along the way, looking at other options based on my age, based on what was changing in terms of facing the reality. Because the challenge with that for a lot of people, the professional sports, is they might confuse their role with their identity, and their identity might be in professional sport. And then all of a sudden I was being approached with, you won't be able to do everything that you have, either your role or identity. So there is a bit of a process going through there, and reluctantly what you end up doing is putting your faith into an orthopedic surgeon and saying, you do your best, dude, because then it's back to me again, and I'll have to see what lessons might I have learned. How did I end up in such a position? Knowing what I know now, what would I do differently? And I watch these guys exchanging hips, shoulders, and it's like a badge of honor, and I'm going, whoa, which part of the information from your joints, from your body, of which you only get one, are you not listening to? And are you prepared to keep rolling the dice and think about 20, 30, 40 years from now, if you have kids, what are you going to be doing?
Well, so even we look at I know you've been over there, Louis Simmons and all those guys.
How
many hip replacements, knee replacements, shoulders?
Each guy is on his own journey, and the challenge with a element of sports and athletes are held at highest esteem, and I admire a lot of things about them in terms of their effort and application and dedication to be the best at what they do. I mean, I've worn shoes.
Yeah.
The challenge basically being is that we perceive sports as healthy. And I go, really? Sports is healthy? I go, yeah, it's great. Look at this here. And I go, okay. In Ireland, I don't know. But again, I think it's similar in Australia. You have, what's that industry called? Sports medicine.
Yeah.
And then out by Santry, Sean, where you used to be from, it's like Santry Sports Surgery Clinic.
Yeah.
Sports physiotherapist. Well, it turns out there's a whole industry created on the basis and the background of sports, because we ignore the signals. They take the painkiller injection, they play on, ignore, I don't want to let the team down, and then going, where is the team going to support you in 20 years' time? And so we have this, be an athlete. I love this now. So they all come in, you need to train like an athlete, be like an athlete. I said, yeah, I mean, train like an athlete, mean like an MMA guy, you're cool. So get boxed in the head, maybe Monday, Wednesday and Friday. Gaelic, you mean get the clatters and go out and run the bejesus out of yourself at 8 or 9 o'clock at night on a wintry night in Ireland. Or if we have the preparation and the mindset of an athlete to deal under pressure, because that's where people run away from pressure. But we learn, and yeah, I know we got some own biles there recently, but I'm saying is, look how much that athlete has basically performed at the highest level with the greatest expectations, that's been able to compartmentalize, either embrace pressure, put it to the side, where everyone's told to be stress is bad. Well, maybe your ability to tolerate the stress is placed upon you, because if you want to get bigger on the food chain in your work, you got to manage more people, you got to make bigger decisions that have an impact on people's lives. Stress is going to be a component of that. I can learn that from an athlete. Yeah. But do I need to train like an athlete?
So it's the same with Tiger Woods, when he used to run, I think, miles every day. Now he's had 2 knee replacements. Michael Bisping the same way, and
yeah, I mean, they look in terms of Bisping and said, well, I ran and that was my fitness. I listened to Bisping because he's funny, and we have all these parts about athletes, and we have Tiger Woods, and again, he's playing with a sport that's massive rotation, that there's lots of forces coming into his joints. Like, I mean, people don't look at golf as an athletic event, but the pressure is coming into your spine, man. I mean, I read a research study recently on that. But if we look at this part of being like an athlete, the lifespan of an athlete is short enough. You might have started young, and again, is the challenge basically is, when we look at these athletes, they're retiring younger. And so, okay, what happens there? Oh, what else might be happening? Well, they're starting strength training earlier. They're bigger, they're faster, probably more technically. But again, is you doing that because of me?
No.
What we're looking at is if we go back, and Sean, we're all looking at this part, and I was saying about the part of what people are holding athletes on a pedestal, and we have this term strength and conditioning specialist. And in my world, and when I'm looking at a strength and conditioning specialist, if you ask most strength and conditioning specialists, where did that word come from? And it came around 1980-81. The National Strength Coaches Association were changing the acronym, or wanted to keep the acronym the same, but they changed it to the National Strength and Conditioning Association, the NSCA from America. That's where the word comes from. You ask most strength coaches, they haven't a clue. But then, as I said, if I'm thinking of a strength coach, one is, I have physical qualities, I have strength. Okay, that's one of them. But now you bias strength as saying that's the mother, the Dietmar, Bleichmacher, or whatever. Mother strength is the mother quality. Okay, you speed, you have endurance, and you have flexibility, which we might look at mobility as opposed to flex bones. So flex again is muscles stretching. That's another question. But I'm saying that these are physical qualities, but we've biased the strength part because it's nearly aligned with manufacturers to being able to sell equipment. And now we have strength coaches who identify themselves, look at my athlete who's able to lift this. And I said, yeah, but is he better at the game? So when I say I look back and I say to these guys and train like athletes, and I go, okay, so what you mean is, if we look at sports, Sean, and we look at where does a strength and conditioning coach stand in the pecking order of a big organization? What is he paid? How many of them is there? What's the ratio of player, athlete to coaches? Like we've seen in county football back home, there's like maybe 2 coaches, a strength coach and assistant coach, to 35 people. So you got 1:17, 1:18 ratio. Those guys would be better off with a personal trainer 1-to-1. It's more specific. You see the MMA guys saying, because I was on the floor sharing it with 125 other athletes, I only got a little time. If a 2-hour session, divide 2 hours by 25 and say, well, actually, how much attention and focused priority to you. So I don't believe in people playing like an athlete, straining like an athlete, unless you're an athlete.
So we're talking about longevity here, obviously. You're saying.
I'm talking about the impact of what you do now and what's the consequence of what that might have on your quality of life in years to come.
Yeah.
Like when I write a program, I'm not thinking of the impact it does now. I'm thinking about what's the impact it's going to have on your life years from now. And the difference between a program and a workout, I watch people go in a workout and it's a 4-week block and they think that's a program. And I know the program is the bigger journey. Like if you're coming to me, Sean, I'm going to bring you through and say, right, Sean, what's the priorities? You came to me initially at first and I'm going, what's the priorities? And you're going, I just want to lose weight and whatever I am and tone up. What do your clients say to you, Sean?
Yeah, just want to lose weight, get fit, tone up.
Get fitter, all of that. Yeah, the buzzwords. Tone up, lose weight, get fitter. Okay, this magic sort of triad of whatever terms that people use. So we bring that person in, and again, is ideally it should be some sort of history assessment. What have you done in the past? Because that's going to influence how my structure's performing now. Because again, is stressing the joints or whatever. I've got a probably biased one leg than another, depending on the sport or the shoulder. Then I'm looking at your injury history. Then I want to look in terms of how does your joints function. And you might tell me weight loss is the goal, but then I'm on walking with you today and I watch you walking and it's a bit like Kaiser Soze and there's a bit of a limp going on and there's a bit of a shift and I'm like, okay, what's going under the surface? So then I want to see how does each individual joint function. And so the goal might be weight loss, but what happens is when we look at the whole priorities, you might say, okay, nutrition, because again, you're probably going to, what is it? What's that the percentage they say about nutrition, Sean, to exercise?
80-20 or something.
80-20. Maybe, just maybe you eat 4 times more than you train.
Yeah.
Just maybe. But I'm saying that both are important, but just maybe on the off chance, that might have a bigger impact than how many calories you think you're going to burn when you exercise. Most people underestimate what they eat and overestimate what they expend in terms of energy. So when we assess it, we're looking at weight loss goal, but then we have a limp, and now I got to look into priorities. So when someone tells me their goal and their priorities, and they tell me, okay, I want to lose weight and this, and I look at their whole history, the next thing I say, okay, Sean, can you show me your calendar? What do you mean your calendar? Your diary. What you going to do for the rest of the week? Now I want to see, because as soon as you go and you compare that calendar diary versus what they told me their priorities is, what's the first thing you'd see?
Yeah, it's not congruent.
The video doesn't match the audio.
Yeah.
There's nothing in terms of what they say is matching with how they've structured their life. You have a limited resource called time. And you get to allocate that resource based on the priorities which are most important to you and your value system. And when you get the guys 40s, 50s and 60s, like the guys that I train, they're not going around with their weighing scales to track my macros. I've got to make it much more visible, simple, something to move, and that way it might be hand size shown. I know you use a little elements of there for portion sizes. How do I make the pictures into some sort of language that we can see, that we can control and progress over time? Yeah. Because they're also probably, if it's a mother, they might have 2 or 3 kids, or if it's someone more focused on career at that stage of their life, it's about career and progression up the ladder. And then it says, I want to have a little bit of a social life. And then there's this thing called romance and a partner. And then I want to, whatever they want to do, their value system will influence their time. But if the goal of the program or if the goal of the training, the coach is saying, we take care of mobility, and I look at these and say, right, the trainer, the S&C's coach, whatever you want to call him, personal trainer, he tells me the program is looking at this, but when I look at how much time is dedicated to each quality, strength, speed, which might be a factor for that demographic. Agnes is not looking for speed to get up out of the track down the road. But again, it might be pain, reduction, pain elimination. What am I doing? Am I creating more stress in the joints? Or endurance? How does my time allocated to each area, not just during the week, but during the individual session? Yeah. So we see in sport, and we talked about athletes earlier on, people say they spend a lot of time on injury prevention. The words are lovely, Their program design tells me that's not the case. So I want to get injury prevention before performance enhancement, but I want to look at that calendar schedule versus their priorities and see if they're aligned. The third point I would get them to is saying, what is the outcome? How do I know? So if it's weight loss, okay, Sean, that is a outcome, and we'll get to the behaviors that I need to do to develop that outcome. But where do I know I'm successful? You know, is it a weight? Is it a dress size? Is it that dress that's been sitting in the closet for ages? Or I've one of the ladies back home. I bought a dress to motivate me to fit into. And I'm like, why would the external dress motivate you? Is that dress gonna pep you up in the morning, going, "Wake up, it's time to work. You got to fit into me soon"? I don't think that's gonna happen. So this is as soon as itis. I think we talked about as soon as itis earlier on. We'll either come back to it a while. But I've got 3 things now so far. I've got my priorities. I look at my agenda, my calendar, and see how I allocated this resource of time focused to whether if it's nutrition, is there meal planning, is there shopping, is there scheduling my lunches? Because I train a lot of professionals. And in the world that Australia's came into, the world of working at home, that you had such a little part, and I said, well, I've been living the dream back home for so long. People are working at their desk, forgetting to eat, inhaling their food right in front of the laptop. There's no scheduled different portion of your house. There should be a place for your exercise if you're trying at home, a portion for your work, and a place to eat. Because you've identified those 3 areas. Never mix them up.
Yep.
Move to different places in the house. And when you're eating, belly breaths, calm my nervous system down. 10 seconds between mouthfuls. So 5 belly breaths, 10 seconds between mouthfuls, 15 minutes to finish the meal, and maybe a 20-minute walk. So I want to structure out everything about that there, because it's easy to say it's just about the macros.
No,
just follow them.
But that's the same with training, where people say, just do the basic movements, compound movements. Now what I want to go today is, we've obviously seen what demographic you work with, and you have your own injury history.
Yeah.
Now I wanted to say, talk us through how your vision of training has been influenced and changed over that period.
Yeah, I mean, as I said,
joint stress.
Yeah, I fell down a rabbit hole in terms of there, but again, you had to lose that identity, a role, and say every lot of it was external performance. Tom Purvis used a great term: external performance, internal performance. External being the weight I lifted, the number.
So we're talking about, you see on Instagram, my client lifted 100
the squat,
kilos,
the chin. I had clients doing
chin-ups.
12 chin-ups. All of this. Look at me, I'm great. Get a few likes. Probably Instagram wasn't as big then. The female deadlifted 100 kilos. Did it, and I got all of these parts where the equipment then was like I think it's 3,000 square foot at the time. It was like 4 racks that someone could squat on the inside and the outside. Are pretty good racks, leg curls, all of that part, but influenced by your mentors and your choices of decisions.
But that's even because obviously in a good way, women and that are going, okay, weight training's good, it's beneficial, we need to do more of this, but then taken to the extreme where going, we need to lift as heavy as possible.
Their entry level is came in and say, I need to start with a squat, and I'm watching the gyms here. I'm in Australia, man, and I'm just there cringing.
Well, they've set it up for, we need to do compound movements, and blah blah blah. That's the way the
tour of the sales consultant in it. It's like, and here we have the free weights,
the functional area,
and it's like the doves just flew out of the clouds, and the sunlight opened up as we came to the free route, and I'm going, man, there's so many ways. Like, not to say that, like, because people mistake and think machines are easy. That's technical skill too. Everything's a skill, and the question is, when you're looking at this compound movements, you're looking at many joints, and functional exercise doesn't mean everything's functioning. And what I mean by that is, if we looked at the joints and the components in a deadlift, like, people suddenly think that because they magically say it's a compound exercise and it's functional, and when you look at functional, you look in terms of where did that word come from? And they say, I'm recreating me daily movements, and I'm just looking at the CrossFit ones.
Primal movement patterns.
There's so many. You've got the primal movement patterns. We have the I'm recreating daily activities. Okay, because every mother does a clean and snatch with her kid in the morning. You know what I mean? And that everyone's deadlifting and everyone's walking with a kettlebell over their head and lunging at the same time. And now all of a sudden hunters, like, when you go back and look in terms of what does it take to do this, and I'll mention a deadlift and say, right, okay, I've got an ankle joint, a taloacryl joint, I've got a knee joint, I've got a hip joint, I've got lumbar joints. So anyone thinking about L1, L2, L3, well, they're lumbar. I've got the vertebrae in between my spine, my thoracic has got to be able to extend. I've got my shoulder blade that sits on top of that, which is called a scapulothoracic joint. I've got a arm joint that goes in there called a glenohumeral. I've got a neck that's got to be extension. I've got, not to mention wrist and elbow. And all these people are going, magically, because I called it a compound exercise, I've assessed all of those, they're magically going to work together. The integrated movement of a squat or a deadlift or a bench is only as good as the sum of the isolated points of the joints that work on their own. So in terms of a Tom Purvis thing, he would basically use it an orchestration. And what I have is, I have all these parts of an orchestra that have to come together to sing and play great music. And I need a composer, which may be your brain. The problem basically is if I haven't assessed, does this, I've got my string section over here, and again, sometimes I want them big, sometimes I want them slow. Then I've got my drums over here, and I go bump, 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 and I go slow. And then I have other part, and then eventually I bring them together. But if there's someone in that chain who isn't up to par, I need to take them out of the class, and I need to say, we need to give you grinds. I need to teach you how to work on your own before I bring you into this here. So when I'm coaching people 40, 50, 60, but even 20s, because people, people are getting injured earlier because of this need for the external gratification of a like, of a thumbs up, or go, attaboy, look at you, you're great. Oh my God. Look at my client, the trainers. Look at my client. I said, will you be doing the same thing when she's coming in with a herniated vertebra?
We were just talking about someone that was a case where he was filming his client, wasn't he, for social media?
Yeah, so like I was in a part of, like, I watch a trainer and they're obviously trying to build social proof, and they go to some marketing guru and
something that's popped up on your YouTube.
Someone there that's creeping on, looks like there he still hasn't hit puberty, but he's going to tell you how to be 6 figures or 7 figures, and you're just going, man, like, and even as I said, there's a lot of gym owners, and I'm seeing these guys becoming gurus. And I think I've said before, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And you've got all these people eager to jump on the media and jump on how many followers and likes that they have, and technically incompetent. I haven't even asked the question, don't even know where to start. And I was saying to Sean about, in terms of, if I'm engaged in that session, depending on the duration, if we say 60 minutes, well, it's 36,000 focused attention seconds on that client, or whatever it is in the maths. But the point basically being is, I was explaining to Sean, there was a case in the UK, I think, where a trainer is videotaping his client, who incidentally possibly happened to be a hedge fund manager, probably worth a few shekels, and your man injured his back, and he sued the gym and he sued the trainer. And you bring in an expert witness and says, well, is that guy paying attention as he's there behind his iPhone not doing this? Yeah. And crazy. The gym, the trainer, taken to the cleaners. Awesome. You imagine, as I said, is you never see the orthopedic surgeon, here I am doing a knee surgery, hold on, check. Yeah. And he gets a selfie beside him.
Oh wait, never doing that before he delivers the food.
Hey, maybe he is. He's holding up. Hey, look at me. So I think, as the problem basically been, is what we call, in terms of the quality delivery of a session, what does that look like? Yeah. And how do we best serve our client?
But even when it comes to the squat, you like I mentioned, with all the joints and everything that's happening.
Yeah.
Talk us through. There's obviously be so many common mistakes, but one which you always discuss is, someone comes in and you do a timeline of, let's look at your injuries, and you go, no, I don't have any injuries. Okay, you might watch them squat and you go, have you injured that ankle? I broke my foot 4 times or something like that. How does little stuff like that, where we look up and down the chain, influence that movement?
Well, we got a mixture of that, and like, so sometimes it's to go, someone's came into me, well, the first problem, Sean, we have this functional movement screen or functional assessment. So I'm going to give you a skill, knowing that client has probably never done it before, but then we're going to say that it's an everyday movement. So again, is we're going to go into a squat, and we're going to say, well, what stance? Well, where do you go? Where do you go over the toilet? Where do you go over the John? What stance do you do? And look, we're giving them a skill, And we have this thing where we do an overhead squat, even worse.
Yeah.
And we're bringing someone in and we're saying this and saying, like in the FMS, oh, you're a failure. Look at your ability to do this. Oh man, you're broken. But again, as we are assessing people in a functional movement or whatever name we want to give it, without assessing the ability of each one of those individual joints to function. Mm-hmm. And I walked around and I said, we were walking around today, and I said, Sean, look at that man trying to go up the stairs, all right? Because again, is a lot of the things in terms of exercises using machines are vilified. Because we got a leg extension, man, that's not functional. I said, well, it is. It's functional as the quadriceps is to help extend the knee. And where does that come into place? Well, walking up the stairs. Look at that old man at 6 years of age. If he had better extensors of his knee, his quads, he'd be able to get up the stairs better. But again, I'm trying to think of the guy that basically researched a lot of stuff in terms of training over 50. There's a book called Strength Training After 50. Can't think of his name off the top of my head. But he has a lot of research studies where he went to nursing homes and they give him a sequence of exercises and they use machines and they included leg extension, toe presses or something in terms of strengthening of the calf. And these people walked further, walked for longer, and were able to get up and down off a chair quicker. So this whole idea that, like, I was saying to you that to improve an exercise, I don't need to do the exercise. I could get a client to do isometric contractions of position of the body on the table, treatment table, which increases output into those muscles, which increases stability around those joints, which my brain then perceives then, okay, it's a bit safer, I can put weight into that area. And we also have this thing called visualization. Visualization might be used. You might see the elite athletes, and there's a good one I think on like a research study on basketballers, where like people were working on the free throws, people were visualizing their free throws, and how do they do? The people that were visualizing their free throws, even though they didn't physically do the act, got better at the act. And when we can get an element of doing an isometric contraction. So you imagine if you're lying on your side and I said to you, lift your leg up to the side, like lifting up to the ceiling, you're abducting, you're going all Jane Fonda me. But what happens is I'm holding my hand at the top, that you're just pushing your leg up into me, but it's not being able to move, but you can feel those muscles working. That's an isometric contraction. I'm increasing your brain's ability to contract muscles. In those, I can't isolate muscles, but I've got a group of muscles working, and my brain is getting more efficient, sending messages from my spinal cord to the muscles, back to the spinal cord, back to the brain, and the brain can start to go, oh man, that fella's starting to work now. I've got more of this and as in the team, I can start to alter my movement and give you more movement into the joint, in the muscles around that joint, to perform the activity better. Mm-hmm. But that conversation had started from, because we are assessing people with a movement before we've actually seen those joints move.
But even the same way we said the signal to your spinal cord and your brain will learn a different movement pattern and may adopt that works the opposite if you have had a niggle or had an injury, and now suddenly your brain, which is made for this short-term survival, is going to compensate and alter your movement pattern, which is what you kind of said happened to your hip to relate it back where you might have
so I mean, if we think about like the certain programming we're going to put into our body, I have my hardware, and if my hardware is damaged, my programming and my software is going to change. I'm going to alter the movement mechanics, because externally I just want to go from point A to point B. I'm not thinking about how did I get there. I just started walking, and when we watch those people today, and I'm watching, he says, do you think he's got any pain? How long do you think this is normal in his head, or that it's an inability? What might we find if we asked him his injury history about how he's compensated? Because a lot of people don't relate the injuries that they've had, the magnified over time, that they're in their 20s, that they did the run, they did the 5k, the 10k, the Fran time, whatever it was. And like, I know the CrossFit Games on, and there's some people there and their ability to push their bodies, but I'm just saying is, the clue is the amount of rock tape and everything's coming around, they're patched up together. And I'm not doubting that athletes will play with an element of pain. Well, there's a little bit of an insight into that. The question is, what happens every year is an extra surgery, and I watch the AFL and I watch the injured list, and the question is, what does that look like for that player, not just now, after now? So if you Google James Haskell and Dillian White, They're talking about, these are like former English rugby internationals. This is 1 year after playing professional sport, and your man James Haskell's in pain. He's getting multiple injections into his joints. He's waiting for either surgery, he's got three herniated discs. Well, he's three herniated discs. He's living on painkillers. When he's moved from the professional sport, the athlete, with a support network of physios, osteos, everyone at his beck and call, back into his normal life, has to pay for 1 or 2 surgeries, paying a fortune, and he thought he was on his own, and he contacted Damien Maher. And if you look it up, it might be rugby.ie or whatever, but basically Damien Maher basically said, man, I'm crippled. These are lads 1 year after this, like 30 something, not fathers yet, if that was their intention or whatever, like James Haskell. I haven't seen that part, but his body is broken. And the question is, he would say, like in the interview, he talks about, man, he'd go to train and then go, oh man, it's a scrummaging session today and I'm already in bits beforehand. What am I going to be like after? So the decision, and it is a decision, to ignore the signals that have been given to you from your body and the compensation. How am I adapting to the stresses I'm placed upon it?
But even ones that you mightn't see, which, example, ankle sprains, which you probably don't even notice, think anything of, but that suddenly's altered your walking mechanics and your gait and
everything, because your brain is kind of like, so some people talk about a bottom up, meaning my ankle's giving me the feedback up, or it's top down, my brain's giving me the message down. So there's this solid conversation going on in the physiotherapy world all the time about what may be influencing. But yes, as I said, is like when we look at the feet, the toes, what it is, like there's loads of joints going on in terms of that's happening on. And the question is, I need to move, I need to get around. And when we look, and I said to you earlier on about, like I was giving you a sequence of stuff to do, and I said, right, Sean, what's the priorities? What's the agenda? What is the measurement of the outcome? The fourth point, Sean, I'm going to ask you is who's on your team? And when I'm coming to someone in their 40s or 50s, it doesn't matter what age, Sean, as I said, you develop skills in elements of psychology, you've looked a little bit more into injury rehabilitation. But again, as if I'm dealing with my guys in 40s, 50s, well, they have a team in other areas of their life. They have an accountant that maybe does their books in a year. They have a solicitor in the time when they get into court. When they come into 40s and 50s, there's lots of tools I can do, whether I want to wear those shoes or whether I want to move them to elsewhere. Meaning I might go physiotherapist, osteopath, or whatever I think is the best part. Okay, there might be a doctor you need to work with. These guys are coming in, and these are landmines. There is so much stuff going under the surface that I'm unaware of, and it's the same with a lot of people in exercise. There are potential landmines of joints and stuff that's not right, and discs, and everything's going on. To like, there is like blood pressure to stress to like anything there, a stroke or heart attack. What is going on under the surface? So I might need a doctor on my team. Okay, I might need someone like Sean, basically in terms of writing my programs or coaching me that I'm executing the exercises perfectly. And if I'm dealing with a lot of women and guys, I might need a psychotherapist. I might need someone, because when we look at this thing called weight loss, you can be responsible, Sean, for the 3 hours you're with him. But the question basically is, if what's influencing their behavior to nutrition and emotional eating is based on an event that's happened in their past that they have not dealt with, every time they reach that part in their mind where they think about that event and their response all the time is to eating, no amount of training is going to deal with that. And so, I mentioned before about different books I used to look at years ago. This is like 15, 20 years ago. And because I was looking at that and saying, right, Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And Molecules of Emotion by Candace Pert. How my psychology influences my physiology. And again, the guy that came up with the terms on PTSD, post-stress traumatic disorder or whatever, was your body keeps the score. So I might need more of these guys on my team before I then move on to the fifth part and say, right, what are the 5 behaviors? In terms of people in the business world, we'll talk about the KPIs and the key performance indicators, and I'm going, that's your post-mortem. My patient died of diabetes. And then you get all the trainers going, I got my 6-figure training, and I go, don't even worry about the 6 figures. What did you bleed and keep? But really what we want to look at is what is a critical driver, and a driver influences the KPI. The KPI is the end result. I want to know what's the critical drivers I need to develop for that client to give them the outcome of the priorities that they said, and then how did I schedule into their agenda, their calendar? What did I determine as success with them, because they're part of the team as well, in terms of success and the outcome, who is on my team that I might need to go through here, because at different stages of that calendar month, Sean, we might be working and say, Sean, if you're working with the likes of a psychotherapist, that's going to have a lot of emotional challenge to the client, which is going to pull in the emotional energy. So they're outputting training that month. But in terms of, we are in a car, we have set the Google, which is where a lot of people don't even start with. I don't have a Google map. I'm sitting in the car, I know the destination. Okay, that's a great start. Now within that car, I have multiple drivers. Sean might be starting with injury rehab for first, because he can't burn off more calories if he's still dealing with injuries that happened from stupid training years before. And he might have to negotiate with the client and say, listen, we're just going to be working on behaviors. We might move less because we're working on these small joints that apparently don't expend as much energy. And again, they're small, or whatever, all this little narrative, that's another thing. Yeah. But again, you're learning about eating behaviors. You might be making small changes. You're not eating loads, but you're eating loads. And what I mean by there is, you're eating caloric dense foods to fill you up more, as opposed to, nutrient dense food to fill you up more that are caloric poor. There's not many calories when you're eating chicken and broccoli and rice, versus a donut, a packet of Pringles, whatever, a Jaffa cake, 49 calories a cake. We had the Jaffa cake challenge back in the gym before. It was taking women 20 minutes to burn off one Jaffa cake. Yeah. I've never eaten one Jaffa cake. I've polished off the box if I'm going for it. Yeah. Yeah. But the point basically being is, we have those metrics, and I need to rotate who is the driver of the car. And sometimes it mightn't feel that the car is going fast, but the car will go a lot faster as soon as you deal with those maybe emotional challenges you had in the past, as soon as you treat that old ankle injury that I did back when I was 15, but this is like 25 years ago. As soon as I start to learn the skill of actually how to find the muscle and contract the muscle, as opposed to externally I lifted the weight. So if we're looking to expand calories, which we're not really looking to do, we're looking to get better at a skill and mastery. Because when I coach people for 20 years, if after 20 years I'm still talking weight loss, one of us isn't doing our jobs. So
yeah, but even when you coach people, obviously that's one of the things we're going to look at, fat loss, if that's the goal, but you're also looking at joint health, how you move, longevity, rather than just the people that go, okay, I'm going to go in a calorie deficit, I'm going to do all these compound lifts, and then suddenly, okay, you've lost a few kilos, but you've blown your back out, or whatever it is. So you're covering all the bases, which we should be looking at.
Like you are looking, like if we are going to sit back and admire the Olympics. Mm-hmm. And we're looking at these athletes, and every country is going to have their heroes, and I'm watching obviously the Aussie ones and all this sort of parts, and I have to go to Facebook or somewhere to try and find the Irish results, unfortunately. Yeah. But we are looking at people that devoted the last maybe 8 to 10 years of their life to try and get for this one moment. So when we are looking at that 4-year cycle, and that athlete will be training under guidance, where there'll be times where he'll be pushing hard to times he's recovering. Because again, there's no point in you pushing hard for the first 2 years and then being injured when it comes to the Olympics. So it's periodizing the same where it is, but also be asking about the challenge for the coaches that are probably in that field. Is the athlete coming first or the client? And that's what I mean by trainers posting pictures with the client in the different states of undress. Who's driving that? And is it really what the client was looking for? I'm not doubting that they feel great now. I'm saying in 10 years now, whatever, is that their footprint on the digital world? Is it the 100 kilo deadlift that I did and I'm comparing myself to someone else? Or I've got the bench press and I did 100 kilos and I'm comparing myself to someone else, which makes me feel inadequate? Why? Because they had arms like a little T-Rex and their bar moved 4 inches while mine moved 12. So these external markers that people don't look at, they said, I got this part here. So my thing, I've got to be considerate about, if I have the client has trusted me to place an external stimulus on someone's body in the hope of some adaptation. Because this is really what we're doing. We're placing a stimulus in the body in the hope of adaptation. Either way, it is an adaptation. It can be a positive one or a negative one. And the question is not what's the intermediate win, but what does it look like for if an athlete, for his family, like 15, 20 years time. And for my client, one of my old clients came back and he said like, okay, this, and he says, you train him as well. I see Rob. And he says like, no, I still remember the first time that you said, I says, what? He says, well, you said injury prevention before and you had other stuff. Like he didn't say performance enhancement, but injury first. He says, why? Do you know how I know? Because you said I wouldn't be able to pay you if I'm injured. Well, not that it was about finances. I'm looking at.
Well, it's the same even
proven health.
If you look at the good strength and conditioning coaches, go, okay, what's the goal? Is it to squat this amount? No, it's just to keep that person on the pitch so they keep playing. And then they'll progress further that way alone.
Yeah, I mean, like, no, I don't mean it like when I'm speaking about strength coaches. And apologies if it.
No, but it's the same.
It's just like I said to people, like the problem with every profession, especially in the fitness, is everyone goes under the same label. I'm a personal trainer. Okay, there's nothing wrong with being a personal trainer. But we have a personal trainer with maybe 20 years of experience, or we could have a personal trainer with 1 year's experience 20 times. He's not much different than what he was when he first set in. And so when we have the athlete, what is the goal of that coach? Is to facilitate the performance alongside the guy's technical skills, tactical skills, and manage out his week with his calendar, how much he spends to each one, with the ultimate goal being his performance at the weekend for his team and injury prevention. Because if the athlete gets injured in the training process, someone's going to have to pay that wage bill. And not only will the athlete, doesn't matter if he's got the biggest bench, but he's tore his pec and he's up in the stands watching it. His goal is to play better rugby, better soccer, better Gaelic, whatever the sport is. And the challenge basically being is, when we look at the sport, I always look at the sport like a boxing and MMA, and not this apart, but I look and say, who is lifting who on whose shoulders at the end of it? It's about the athlete. It's about the client. And they might not know at times, but again, as this might be the coach, and as he gets more experience, what would you have that you don't have now when you have 100 kilo deadlift, as an example? Oh, but I need to. So what would you have? How would your life be different? And what might be the potential risk to benefit ratio if you achieve that? So I'm going to give them ownership of the decision. I can guide them, but I will give them some critical questions and say, well, here is the pros, here's the cons. Are you willing to accept the consequences of either decision? Because you are going to make a decision.
So here's the interesting thing. People listening might be go, oh, well, they're just probably like, they don't let their clients lift heavy. So when you look at training, exercise, like, what would you say to that? We're talking about people lifting heavy and we're saying how it's bad, but it's
heavy is relative to the person, their ability, their skill, their goal. How is the appropriate progression? Have I got them to that level?
Yeah.
And my point basically being is not to negate that there will be an element where you will challenge the body.
Yeah.
In the sport of powerlifting, that is their goal. It's an external distance. So your goal is to lift the heaviest distance the heaviest weight, the shortest distance.
And I think that's a big problem because we've been so influenced by powerlifting.
Yeah, you've got these guys, and I see it in the Aussies and the rugby, and all these guys, powerlifters, are coming in to tell these strength coaches about this is how you should train to increase their strength. But if you look at these powerlifters, they don't even have the ability to put their hands in a bar. They had to develop a bar called the Buffalo bar that bent down because they had less external rotation, ability to put their hands in a bar, like in a position. And these are telling people to do it. And if these guys went to sprint 10 meters, they're going to leave probably their hamstrings around it because they're not trained in that position.
And you usually see them walk around like fucking penguins.
Yeah, like John Wayne. Their feet are gone in, they're sweeping the roads, they're picking up a whole list of stuff as they sweep their foot. You know, so these guys, there's a great story. I went over to a fellow called Judd Logan. Judd Logan is a 4-time Olympian. And I interned in, you mentioned Westside. And then I went up to Ashland University and spent a day with Judd watching his athletes. And he mentioned about the time the powerlifters came up and they're saying about, the box squat. You should do the box squat. And he goes, Judd is like, well, what's the box squat? He goes, man, the big squat. So the box squat originated down in this gym, down in Cleveland, Ohio. He says, well, which one is it? He goes, well, I can't demonstrate it because you don't have the right bar. He says, what do you mean? Well, like in this very well-known coach basically would always come along with one or two little minions on the back end, and he said, "Well, ask your sidekick to do the exercise." No, he can't demonstrate it easier. So they had to talk Judd for one of his athletes to demonstrate the exercise of a box squat, because the other two guys didn't have the actual ability of their shoulder to put their hands on the bar.
But because their bodies adapted to that particular sport.
And yeah, they didn't, like, they had to keep modifying equipment to cater for the lack of ability and movement of the shoulder. So again, is in terms of, not to say pressing, but just you have a focused attention on three main lifts. Now again, is these guys would try and cycle the exercises, so they're not really hitting the joint or the same area, because because that's the challenge. When you live this world of, I am only doing these lifts at this way, at this exercise, well, you are stressing the joint at that particular point all the time. Everything is a tool. The question is, when do I use the tool? I go around with a tool belt. If I only have 3 tools in my tool belt, the old saying, if I only have a hammer, everything else looks like a nail. I need to challenge the joints, the muscles around the joints, and I need to structure the programming. Periodization was a fancy name for plan, and that's what I said about a program. It's taking me on a journey. So I'm not doing the same exercises, or I start with my big bang because these expend the most calories and these are most calorie.
Well, that would have been definitely myself and Ungi years where you go, look,
what are all the shorts?
What are the lifts we want to get people to? Barbell squatting, barbell deadlifting.
Yep.
So again, we're trying to fit people to that lifts, and we go, well, why does some people look great in this and some people look absolutely horrendous?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Why do some look? It's interesting. When you've gone as far down the rabbit hole as mine, and you've got 10 dead bodies on the counter, and you're cutting away at a few bodies, and you're looking at this hip, and you're looking at the hip, and you go, man, his hip looks different than his hip. What? You mean the anatomy books were wrong? Yeah, this fella, his hip and his angle and the acetabulum, which is the socket, is a deeper socket. Or the angle is facing down on the acetabulum, meaning it's pointing down. So, what does that mean? That guy might be good at running and crap at squatting. And you see this other guy that looks like he's got more lateral movement in his part of his hip. And you see, like, Paul Grillia's got some great pictures of this. It really is an eye-opener for trainers. And as I said, the thing is, once you know, take ownership. You can't keep living the same lie and living the same spiel if you've been exposed to that, because what it will do is, Paul Grilli's pictures, if you understand anatomy, you will see, okay, this fella will probably have better lateral rotation, but probably poor extension on his hip. So this fella is going to be a deep squatter, and he's got great in him. But my Celtic friend of Celtic origin with traditional, probably deep sockets that good in flexion, running, and backwards extension, is the reason we don't see Seamus O'Shaughnessy up on the top of the Olympic podium for weightlifting, because he's got the wrong parents.
Or even CrossFit Games, like you said, that's going to be mostly...
Well, you get all these guys that are going to try and do it, and that's the problem, is we have all these mobility experts and WODs and mods, whatever. But the problem basically being is, you might have structural, not limitations, you might have to just respect your anatomy and the architectural structure that you've been given. Because again, as I've looked at lumbar spines, that there's space between the vertebrae. And I've watched other ones that have less. What does that mean? Well, it means Lucy's gone to yoga and she's tried to go into her back bend and her crab, and she can't figure out why she can't do it, because her bones are hitting bone on bone earlier. But her instructor, with the best intentions, saying, keep working on that, Lucy. It'll come around. Lucy, unless you get an angle grinder to your spine. And you'll see them in everything from the shoulder, Sean, from the scapulohumeral, that they'll hit bone on bone a lot earlier. And we have this glorification to say, this is how the exercise has. And we are trying to make exercises fit, or making people fit an exercise, as opposed to making an exercise fit what I have in front of me. I need to respect their anatomy. I need to respect their skill. I need to know that there's potential landmines. There may be bone spurs in and around those certain joints. And they have entrusted me to place a stress called exercise upon their joints, in the hope of getting in some physiological adaptation, whether that is muscle growth, bone density, longevity, whatever, burning fat and building muscle with a bigger engine. It's going to burn more calories, and say, all of these, and they've empowered us with that decision and trusted us. And your question about it years to come, my question to a lot of trainers is, what would happen if the laws changed and all of a sudden you became liable for the exercise programs you deliver to your clients when they are struggling with their knees and require an orthopedic surgeon in years to come, and you are responsible? Would you have the details of the programs that you gave them in the workout? Or did you go to Instagram that day? I can't remember who I did. Who was the workout of the day? Somebody used to laugh at me. All these people are going to a CrossFit workout and they were going to celebrate some soldier who died in Iraq or whatever, or Afghanistan. I'm not denying the sacrifice that these soldiers made. But I don't think me sacrificing my joints in the matter of getting a faster friend time is going to make these guys any better.
It's the same way even when it comes to, say, CrossFit. A lot of it's overhead flexion. You need to have good range of motion in your shoulders, and you say, well, before you maybe do a barbell snatch or even an overhead press, who's assessing your shoulder range? And that's what we're talking about.
How have you earned the right to go through? So the question basically becomes in terms of what's the entry level? Because if we look at the CrossFit education process, and there's some good in terms of coaches looking to be communicators and trying to get better in terms of used to having a presence and all this. The CrossFit certification program is a weekend program. And now all of a sudden you're going to certify my joints. Why? We're back to assessing movement. Oh, which joints were involved in that movement? How did you know that they were working? What was it that you came to this decision? Because then you become a limitation of equipment because we don't use machines. We build them. I mean, you idiot. Because now, as I said, is you were giving me, no you didn't, you were too cheap to buy machines because the cheapest way to set up a gym is just buy racks of barbells, medicine balls, a few dowel rods, a few cheap plates from China, and then say, we're going to call it functional exercise, which is really means we're going to go to the rack. Okay, so here's what we're doing, right? I've got some men in their 30s, 40s, we've got some women in their 20s, and they're going to get this here, and they've been all over the gram, and we're all going to go down to Coles. They said they'll sell clothes. Do they sell clothes?
No.
What did they
Kmart.
say? Kmart. Let's go to Kmart. Right, I'm going to get 30 people down to Kmart because we all did the same exercise, regardless of the proportions that we had. We all got the same exercise cues. We went chin to bar. We went ass to grass. We went all this. Well, let's all buy size 14 trousers, whatever that is for females, the equivalent for male, and let's all put them on and see them fit. And you go, man, you're an idiot. They wouldn't all fit. I said, really? That's amazing. Because I'm imagining those exercises didn't fit every one of those people, but you externally got the goal, got the number, and you were able to compare yourself to the standard in America because you're all the same anatomy. Oh, he says, what? So I just go back and say, that's not professional.
Well, it's the same even, can't remember the guy who's won the last 8 CrossFit games. And if you look at him, he probably has the same structure as me, relatively small. His legs are equal limb length. He could drop down into a perfect squat, just a bodyweight squat. And then you obviously then look at your own structure. No one like you winning CrossFit games.
Yeah, but again, it's like you look in terms of the joint, and when we look in terms of you start to look a bit more. And I look at people there, and in bodybuilding. I've interned with a lot of the top bodybuilders. I've interned with Frank Zane, who won Mr. Universe or Mr. Olympia a few times. Lou Ferrigno, the Incredible Hulk, went over to California to do a time thing. Tom Hanks, Bobby Robinson. I interned with a lot of these fellas, the old school, because they're 60s and 70s. I said, what would you say to yourself now today? And Frank Zane's like, man, I wouldn't be pressing behind the back. Because again, we've got this external rotation. We've got a closed pack position, which means the joint is nearly rubbing off each other as we press. And people say, oh, well, they're going to work on me flexibility. I says, okay, there's question and stuff there, to let go of these people that have this part. But the part basically being is, Frank Zane, I was able to put my hand around his ankle joint. He has very thin ankles, so anything muscular above that, it makes his calves look bigger. Which makes him aesthetically looking good for the sport of bodybuilding, which means his wrists are narrow, but his biceps look bigger because of there. But if he had a thicker wrist, he's a bigger joint surface to disperse force. So if you imagine, Sean, I've got a fist banging on these two versus I've got a fist banging on this. This joint is going to be able to disperse the force over a bigger surface area, so it's not going to wear out as quick. So people, when we're looking at CERN, when you're looking at me and you, not to mention then, if you put your arms out, Sean, and I put my arms out, if my arms are going out 4 inches more, every rep, I need to push that 4 inches further, and it has to come back 4 inches back. So every rep, I'm doing 8 inches further of a magnitude of movement. So I either got to move faster, which means, Sean, I got to decelerate faster. So if Sean's driving along at 40 mile an hour, I need to go 60 and put the brakes on a 60 and put it in reverse. I need to go bump, 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 and tell me what might impact that inertial properties, because we're not really lifting the weight, we're trying to throw it, and then we have to put the brakes on it. So this becomes, actually, we're contracting muscle. I'm doing movements, not muscles. Yeah, you need movements, you need muscles to do the movements, to do all of this. But when we look at that joint surface, we might get someone that's more tolerant to it because they have a bigger surface area of their joints, and these guys are generally stronger because they've got better anatomy. We have a distance in terms of our distance of what we're traveling. So then it becomes a sport specific. If we look at the average weight of the Navy SEALs, they used to say they're about 5'7", 165 pounds. And the big fellas with loads of muscle didn't flow. Like, you never watch all the movies and all that sort of stuff. And the thing is, when we're looking at an athletic event, there's two things that influence it: genetics and geography. So if you're Usain Bolt and you're born with them genetics, you're born in the right country to be the best sprinter in the world. If you are Usain Bolt and you're born down in Cork, you'll make a good full forward. So his sport is going to dictate this here. And you look in terms of Ireland has done well in the Olympics, well by an Irish standards, in what? Rowing. And where are they? Skibbereen, down in West Cork. And what's they do in West Cork? Probably nothing much else. And where are you based? Right beside the river. But you either have to move your genetics to a place where that geography is suited to your sport. And so we have this fantasy of everyone's an athlete.
Or even on that, like, as we said, everyone should be able to squat low, and then you're saying, well, that's your genetics dictating. And
what is low? And the question is this with an external load? And do you know what's going on under that joint before? And is there bone spurs? Is there stuff that's gone on that you're not aware of? Because you've taught an external movement, because we suddenly say, it develops magical properties as soon as I say it's functional, it's primal. Everyone should be doing it. Really? How did you work that out? Because again is, when we look to do a squat, I've got to keep my center of mass, my body, over my base of support. If I run out of movement in my ankle, meaning this tibia has got to go forward, but I run out of movement, well then my spine is going to come over. And then what happens is I crumble over. Now the weight isn't over my legs anymore. And I'm not working, which was the goal of the exercise I thought it was. I'm going to build my legs or quads or ass or whatever. Like, I mean, I watch, it varies around in terms of, okay, where am I putting the load? But we have this part where we think it's all the same for everyone. A back squat is going to work the glutes and a front squat is going to work the quads. Well, it depends. Whose structure did we look upon? What was the cues? How did you set that up? Was there heel lift? Was there whatever? So we have this external view of an exercise, how we think it should look like. And when we're watching the Olympics, and I mentioned Simone Biles, we measure performance by, that looks great. Then we go to weightlifting and we go, he lifted a heavy weight. So now it was an external distance that it travelled. And then we're going to run on to the track. He ran fast. He did it in this much seconds. And at no stage did we look at these external markers of performance with the internal performance of their joints. But if those joints aren't working well, that external performance is not working. So our first point of call, Sean, is to look back and say, what is the range of available joint position in each joint? Does each joint being able to move relative to the other? Is that a structural limitation? Is it something that's developed over time? Or is that what they were born with?
Yeah. So it's not always the case, as you said, of mobility. Sometimes that may just be your genetics, the way your structure is.
We come on to this, like, and you look at genetics, and like people look, and now all of a sudden we become, I've worn these shoes before. We're going to assess your posture. Stand there. And I see a few guys on the gram, and they're just like I keep thinking this fella is Superman. He's got the X-ray eyes, and he's looking at someone. Can you see what's happening? Can you see which leg they're having pain with? You know, I have seen pictures with people of a scoliosis, and it looks like that shoulder's lifted and this glute isn't working and this sort of stuff in it there. I did not see the scoliosis. I'm just going, man. And then when you dissect a few bodies and you've got multiple pelvises in front of you, and then we come back to the old school way, which would have been the osteopath, and I would have been told that this angle of the posterior part of the pelvis, the posterior superior spine, or like, you know, looking at the PSOS, and I'm looking at the angle to the anterior part of the spine, and I'm looking at this, and they used to say, well, 10 degrees. But when I show you 2 or 3 pelvises that all are in the same height and the angle is all different, now what are you telling me? So again, is we have the crack about the Dunning-Kruger.
Yeah.
And we have these guys on the internet who have low knowledge, loads of confidence, posting loads of stuff about how you should be doing. And they're at the peak amount stupid. And it will take them a bit of time to be humbled, to go down to the valley of despair, before they begin that journey that you and I have been on for so long in terms of the slope of enlightenment. Until you get to, when I look at something, it's never, that's the answer. Not to be an idiot, like in terms of telling you it depends. I'm just thinking of how many list of potential options might have influenced the way that person moved. And do I have some form of way of maybe articulating and assessing the architecture of that joint at a single point before I try and orchestrate the skill of putting everything together, meaning your compound lift? And what was my journey to get them there? I watch when the gyms were open, this necessity of everyone to do the external, and they're too good to do these other joints, and we shouldn't train these muscles in isolation. We should do functional exercise, and functional exercise is recreating the movement, and all these things should move. And I go, what are you doing the plank for? You're not moving. Oh, and I go, you're not moving. I thought it was functional. I thought all these things I gotta, oh well, this is here, and then I'm not isolating. You never isolate. I says, were you training the TVA? Not to say that you could isolate, but you're training the, what was that one? Because you get the Pilates ones do that ones. And I just go, man, there's just so many parts that, you know, I jump down the rabbit hole, and I just sit back and I go, man, there's so much left to learn. I go, man, this is getting overwhelming. And I go, and that's only the technical part of training. Where you and I both know is you understand in psychology, you understand in communication, you understand in nutrition and biochemistry. And I'm like,
but even the technical part for me, I don't think, like with nutrition, the information's kind of out there. With training, it's so easy to get lost in, okay, this is the answer. So you're saying even when you have a client, you might look and assess what you can in regards maybe what they're born with, maybe you might look at their injury history, some joints that may be lacking in regards to ankle, whatever it is. Then how, if you focus on that, how do you bring it together? It's, again, we're not saying you'll never squat, but you might do a different squat depending on each person. So how do you fit?
Some things are being influenced, like I'm influenced by obviously different guys I've learned from, and sometimes it is a paradigm shift. You mentioned about what did I change in terms of when I went on this exploration after having surgery, and what did it change in terms of my influence in looking at questioning what I thought I knew, to looking in terms of dissections, to questioning anatomy books, to questioning all this part, to losing the identity attached to, like I'm looking at guys on Instagram and the gram and all this, and I know who their influences are. I know who their idol, their role model, the language that they use, the way they're speaking to everyone with an authority, thinking I'm just saying there's so many flaws in what they're doing. And Tom Purvis has a great like continuum of exercise in terms of when we're looking at this part. But like if I'm training my mom or someone like in the 60s, 70s, but not even that, I've got guys and they might have had an injury. They can't even do a leg extension with their own body weight. So, I mean, I want to restore the ability to even extend the leg in that joint in terms of the quads as knee extensors. And I want to look in terms of, can each ankle joint work individually? But again, as I might use, just to restore the range of motion, using no load. So it might be a bodyweight exercise in a position. Mm-hmm. And then I might use their load against them in part of it there, but it might be isometric for their ability to contract the muscle.
As in a hold, squat hold or whatever?
Not even a squat, because that's a skill. I might have had them like in terms of an isometric in a single joint exercise using multiple muscles, because I can't isolate a muscle. I isolate everything moving, and all you think about like, but again is, that's not functional. No, you were looking at the muscle that was moving. There was loads of muscles working to prevent everything else from moving. So there never was a purely isolated exercise. Everything was working, if that's in a functional world, to do a bicep curl, because I had to stop everything else working so I could work my biceps. But I want to get that single joint to work on its own before I add external load. And then I might bring it along a continuum and say, right, now I'm going to try the movement, or maybe a press, or like I might have isolated and pre-exhausted, so to speak, like from looking at a press to triceps to like posterior delt to anterior delt, all these parts, to isolating the pecs, to then putting that part of the orchestra together. But again, is how could I best do that? Well, okay, I could take away the juggle, the balance, all of the things, the coordination, because people gravitate towards a dumbbell, but the dumbbell is going in 3 different dimensions. It's going in multiple different directions with multiple joints. But if I had a chest press machine, I could take the external juggle around, because my goal of the exercise was to stimulate the muscles. And that'd be the easy way to stimulate the chest. But I can progress it on then, Sean, to say, right, I've got guidance and support, but then I might need guidance but no support. So even if you had the old school Smith rack to a guidance but no guidance, no support, was a barbell press, and I might bring them on it and it go on this journey all the way up. And I could do it in the squat or whatever, because it's a skill. You know, a lot of guys say, we need to, because it's a skill, we're going to work it all the time. I go, yeah, but you're still prioritizing your squat, because again, it's the money exercise. That's the other narrative of other guys. We're doing this here because the top athletes makes the money because of the extensors. We're going to work all the presses, we're going to work all the extensors. And you work on how did they counteract the impact of a squat later on in the week? Did they have a deadlift day? Even though it was a deadlift day. Even if those muscles did balance out, even though we know there's 4 quads, there's 3 hamstrings, maybe 2 heads, and that's even another.
But that's interesting what you said in regards using the machines for the kind of, let's say, stupor-proof stability aspect at the start, where people go, well, machines aren't good. I was told I should use dumbbells, and then you see a beginner using dumbbells and they're shaking around
and they're not contracting any pec, which was the goal of the exercise.
Yeah, the muscle's not working properly.
I can use external stability, I can use whatever I need to do for that client based on their limbs, based on their injury history, because when you, like, interesting thing when I'm training, like I've coached people 20 something years now, but when you've got, like, example, females and they're learning to dumbbell press, but they start on a flat press and they're upside down, well, again, their awareness of where they are in time and space around them changes, and then their ability to coordinate that. And
they take their eye off the dumbbell and turn their head, and
and it looks great. But again, it's like if you're sitting up and they can actually visibly see their arms going and they've got control, it's confidence building, it's awareness of feeling the muscle. And doing, like, and I might use a manual using my hand and manual resistance, and then other times manual assistance. So I say, this is what we're trying to feel, and I might do a one hand and get their hand to put in, and they push their elbow in, not their hand in, the elbow in, because part of the action of the pecs is what's called horizontal. We're going to the front of the body. Adduction, meaning I'm coming inwards. So I want to push that elbow in to get them aware, and they feel and palpate, and I go, okay, see that? If I can't feel the muscle, I'm going to find it hard to stimulate the muscle, which was the goal of the exercise, because we weren't in powerlifting. The goal was to create a stimulus, drive all that energy and that stimulus into the pecs while keeping everything else from moving. And then I can progress my exercise vocabulary in terms of other exercises over time. If I've earned the right, not because it's just the month changed. I got a month. I know. Again, did you master the skills? Because in martial arts, you don't go on to the next area until you've passed your grade. But the only thing that qualifies people for a grade today is the app changed, the program changed, I paid more money. Have I earned the right to master? Because there's no skill that people are looking at. We look at powerlifters, we mentioned like Louis Simmons, all these guys are 30, 40 years trying to master a bench press. And yet we've got Agnes in here, she's trying to basically come and she's going straight into a bench press.
So versus when someone might go straight into a dumbbell press or a barbell press, and they're trying to learn not only how to stabilize those muscles but the skill of the pressing. Well, you go, well, I can just put someone on a chest press. That's going to allow me to work those muscles anyway, and then we can unconsciously develop that skill and bring it into
over
those
time. You can develop,
progressions.
but again, we got to come back into, like, the client came to me with a specific set of priorities, which was weight loss.
Yeah.
And to stimulate weight loss, yes, I can influence nutrition. Yes, I can master skill. I can only do it when they're healthy. I can't train them when they're injured. And so their goal is to feel their muscle. And even though they might say a weight, I have never sat on a beach in my younger days when I'm sitting there, Jesus, would you check out your one over there, Sean? Do you reckon she's 61 kilos?
Yeah.
You know, people train to see a muscle, not necessarily to build a muscle. They want to try and get that sort of feeling, and again is that sense of accomplishment. But again is, we're building a muscle awareness of trying to get a sense of, actually, this is the muscle I'm trying to contract. Because I mean, I saw years ago, like in one of my earlier internships in about 2004, 2005 was to Milos Sarcev, former Mr. Olympia, Mr. Universe winner, or not Mr. Olympia winner, Mr. Universe winner. And again is, Milos was an artist in terms of bodybuilding, as well as a pharmacist, shall we say. But in terms of the skill of trying to feel the muscle, because I saw it back working in the gyms, you'd see guys with 130 kilo bench press, and you'd say, take your top off, dude. So where's your pecs?
Yeah.
If you can bench 130, which a goal, it's just called the chest press, I'm imagining the chest should be growing, but it wasn't the case. And so that really had a pivotal moment in terms of me, in terms of looking at the external load that people lifted, not to mention where I became an exercise mechanics and distance and magnitude, and exercise became physics, and I had to study physics and study joints because I was placing challenges and stresses and forces upon their joints. And that's when exercise became physics. And the main fella that started the conversation maybe 20, 30 years ago, and that is a fella called Tom Purvis out of Oklahoma, we're a resistance training specialist.
Yeah, so even within that, if we were talking about joint health, etc. earlier, if we get someone, say, straight in a bench press, and you talked with the guys who may be pressing a lot of weight but their chest aren't working, we'll say then, well, what is taking over? What joints are then working if your pecs aren't?
It becomes another rabbit hole again, Sean.
Yeah.
So a guy comes in and says, I can't feel my chest when I'm doing bench. Okay, we could obviously look at technique in certain cues. We could look at setup. So the setup of the exercise, before he's even worried about the exercise, how do we set up? What angle do we choose for him? Because again, traditionally they were said the flat chest works the main body of the chest, the incline works the clavicle, and the decline works the sternal portions of the chest. But that's not so. So if your phone has an angle called a compass, and when I started to lie people back, you start to become aware that different people have different size rib cages. So the breadth and depth of your rib cage meant if my rib cage was bigger, the angle of my ribs, where my chest attacks on my sternum, to part over here, if I had a bigger rib cage, I had a steeper angle for a bench press. Where if I had a part of this treasure, a sunken chest, and this angle of the pec, the sternal angle, was like this. This fella had a bow and arrow. He had the better parents to drive that angle, generate more force here. So the question is, can I manipulate the angle I place that client in to try and accentuate what their anatomy is giving them? Or is it the right exercise? Because 9 times out of 10, a bench press is a horrendous exercise for those guys.
For your chest, yeah.
So we need to change the exercise to match the person's anatomy, which then becomes into personal training, as opposed to the magical compound exercise like everyone's got to do this. Because again, I'm looking at their anatomy and say, well, the sternal angle for that person is horrendous, so this exercise is terrible for him. He's saying I can't feel it in my chest. The goal of the exercise was to stimulate the chest. If he can't even feel it, he can't stimulate that muscle, which means we can't achieve the client's goal, which was the priority.
So when you're talking about exercise selection, again, people get caught up in certain exercises that you have to do in regards to squats, deadlifts.
But what if we took the names off them?
Yeah.
What if we didn't even call them? Because again, where did the names come from? So we have the Romanian deadlift. And if you go back to there, I talked to a guy, Jim Schmitz, who was the, I did a few, I've done too many courses. Jim Schmitz used to be a US Olympic weightlifting coach for 2 or 3 Olympics. And I've studied with Jim in Olympic lifting. Don't know why. I'm not training Agnes to do Olympic lifting. But again, is another guy that was there is Ian King, Australian fellow, coach. So when they looked at it, they had a Romanian guy in there and he had massive hamstrings. And they're saying, how did you build them? And he says, I do this one. He started doing an exercise and he's Romanian and he'd big hamstrings. So we called him the Romanian deadlift. So when we look at where does an exercise name come from, and then as I said to you earlier on, I said, well, we train movements, not muscles. Oh, movements. Oh, really? So we do this exercise here, we're training movements. Okay, what happens if I push you up down? So I put you upside down and you did the same movements. Would it change the recruitment of the muscles you work? Turns out it does. If I'm doing this movement, but then I change your body position leaning forward and do the same movement, did it change the recruitment of the muscles? Turns out you did. You're doing a press up when you're doing it on the ground, but I put you upside down and then you press up. It changes which line of force. So we get to place a resistance on a body, and the particular body that we have in front of us might influence it. But we become infatuated with a name, and all these guys seem to develop their name. The CAS, glute lift or hip extension. We have the polygon lat raise. We have the king deadlift. I'm not denying this. I have got books from the 1800s of a Nordic in the 1800s. I can't remember the name. I have it on my laptop. The 1800s, your man was doing Nordic leg curls. But somewhere along the line, they became recreated. And so what happens, a lot of people start to recreate history. But we attach a name to it, and we attach a romance to it, and we attach in the best exercise for the glutes is the deadlift. Really? The best exercise for the quads is. So we build a romance around the name of an exercise, and I need to do this because it's a comparison. So when I say to Sean and say, what's your bench? So we have this part again. And 9 times out of 10, when you ask me, I change these numbers and say, right, I had bench presses, I had squat racks with a lot of people didn't have external rotation. They came into me in mid-50s and their structure and the position and the duration of time that they're in there, my mean is changes that structure. This external rotation, so we can say we're going to get a safety bar, we're going to do the squat, and we're going to do all these parts. But again, is I had about 3 hack squats. One was adjustable. It went from 20 degrees to 70 degrees.
So yeah, now we're moving into the use of, when you're looking at exercise, you're not saying this is the best, you're just looking at these are all tools, but you're grouping machines in with that, which is may deemed as not functional, but then you're saying we can use this particular tool machine to get this person a better squat that may suit them better.
Yeah, but like, the thing is, the romance is we keep thinking squat, everyone's going to squat. I have a lot of clients that don't squat. Because I'm looking at their joint, and I had like a 45. Like I had the best equipped gym, and not like put some stuff there. Like I'm not saying like, it's probably one of the best equipped gyms.
Yeah.
Because I cherry picked a piece of equipment. I manipulated sometimes the engineers to make that weight lighter where I'm mechanically weaker, and harder where I'm mechanically stronger. I deloaded it in terms of elements of a squat where you went down to the bottom and you're mechanically weaker, but the load is the same, and I made it heavier at the top where you're mechanically stronger. So I wanted to challenge a full range challenge, because when I use a dumbbell, I'm strongest at the bottom to halfway and weakest at the top. But if the dumbbell said 20 kilos either way. But the limitation of what I can lift is what I can tolerate at the top. So I can be time and efficient and say, right, I need to break into 2 exercises. I'm going to use a weight for the top rows and then use a weight from the bottom. And a squat would be the same. The limitation of what you can squat is what you can tolerate at the bottom, which then means then I'm not getting challenged at the top, or vice versa. I use a weight to challenge me at the top, but then I can't get down to the bottom. So when we look at this external and we say squat, well, the first question is, why do we think everyone has to squat? The goal was to stimulate the quads, the hamstrings, the glutes. Then it became a center of mass over a base of support, because if you try and get me to do up there my body is going to run out of space. Either I'm going to hit the point in my joint that it runs out of space in the hip flexion, which is the bottom part of a squat, and I have nothing more to give then. Now you're going to ask another joint to pick up the slack. But I ran out of movement here because you had an external belief that my distance should go from here to there. Mm-hmm. That client came in and asked me, keep me safe, help me achieve my goal. I want to look and feel better, tone up, lose weight, get fitter. We suddenly put a point of, you need to be able to do the squat. We projected onto them our beliefs, not understanding their individual body, their goal. We start making it about us and not about the client. So when I use a machine, my goal is to create a stimulus. I'm looking for whatever that might do to keep my client safe, that gives them control. Because as soon as you add the juggle, the skill, the balance, all of that sort of stuff, I'm not thinking about the quads anymore, which was my goal of the exercise. And so losing that romance with the identity that these are functional exercises. Stone Age man, he hinged, he squatted, he twisted when he threw a spear, he lunged as he threw that spear, he had gait and he did his farmer's walk, he pulled the bear after he killed it, and then he pushed the rock over, and he's a primal man, and I want to be like him. Good eye, go home, good eye. You know, I'm not after that. Agnes wanted to come in, shift some pounds, make herself feel better, or fit into those old clothes she hasn't worn out there because she's got a school reunion, or she wants to feel better about herself, or she's raised her kids, she spent a lot of time doing that, and she's entering back the workforce, or she's going on the night out. I'm with you, Agnes, I got you. And I want you to make sure you're safe, that you're able to pick up your kid, Agnes. I've seen people go to CrossFit, come back to me, who have slept on the kitchen floor for 2 months after going for a PR of a deadlift in a trap bar for 135, 140 kilos for an external load at 56 kilos body weight. I trained them earlier and they'd gone off to live the romance or whatever, and then they come back to me and they're sleeping on the floor for the next 2 months. Herniated disc. She wanted to feel better herself, and then she couldn't touch her kids, young kids, couldn't pick up her kids for 2 months from herniated disc of trying to do a trap bar deadlift. 47 years of age. So everything I look at is a tool, and the tool is purchased based on the clients that I have in mind and the clients I look at, and based on the skill, and losing the romance about the standards. I see gyms and they have, here's the standards for our gym. We've got beginners, intermediate, advanced. And I've seen in professional sport, Leicester Tigers had Tigers class, front row, 200 kilo back squat.
Your worth has had it as well.
190. Good. 180 average, 170 wrong club. Like all of this part of it.
It's the kind of the same thing where even speed strength coaches old school used to go, well, you need to squat twice your body weight, and someone's going, do you reckon Usain Bolt squats twice his body weight? He's not a chance. People didn't even squat. Like,
no, and you're getting horrendous parts. You see him in the gym and people, oh, but he can't lift this. And look at the French team. Look at the French team, strength and conditioning fellas. Look at these fellas have never lifted weights before. I talked to Dan Pfaff, and for you guys that don't know Dan Pfaff had trained Donovan Bailey to beat Michael Johnson. He's got like nearly 100 guys that ran under 10 seconds. And I went out to Phoenix, Arizona, and I interned with Dan. He's been on my list for years, and him and Charlie Francis, and unfortunately I didn't get to intern with Charlie before he passed. It was Ben Johnson's old sprint coach. And I talked to Dan about this, about exercise. He says, man, I don't know how many sprinters I ruined. Like in terms of, not only say loads, but he says, I used to think that part, and then I had these sprinters who just had a finesse about their body that strength training ruined them, and they didn't know sprinting and were still running sub 10 seconds. I had other athletes who benefited from strength training. He says it was my thing that I was holding them back by imposing onto them that they should do an external load in terms of squatting, until I realized their connective tissue works better. And this is
that's the same point we were talking about anyway.
What do you call that sort of guy that just looks and sees? Like, I'm watching guys do a 40-meter sprint. Now when I saw him, I went, meow. He went, do you see the way his foot is rotating and his hip is doing that? And I'm like, can you show me the splits of that? So he broke frame by frame by frame. I got it now. He's just sort of like this. And he would go out and palpate the tissue of these athletes before they start training.
Charlie Francis.
Today's not a good day to train. Go back and get that work done. So again, Savat. Savant. Him too. So this is like, and he was working with these athletes, and he would look and say, some of these athletes, I don't put them strength training. these guys don't need to do that. And you would see it in professional sport. I talked to the medical doctor at Liverpool before, and he said about the centre half they had, he'd lost about 4 kilos of muscle. They didn't care. He says, it's not a physical gain anymore. It's not like a battle. It's not about like strength and speed. They don't need those as much of the physical qualities anymore. You'd be able to tolerate. Like I watch the AFL, I watch the body weights, I watch how many kilometers they run, and then the question is, how do you break that down into sprints and what's the needs analysis of that player?
Yeah, so the same thing when you look at a client, or you might be training yourself, you need to do all the need analysis on your client, yourself. As we said, look at your genetics, look at how your joints are moving, and then pick the safest, most appropriate movement for you.
Everything starts with who's the client.
Yeah.
I quoted Purvis earlier on, Tom Purvis. Who's the client? What is the goal? What do they have? Injury history, health history. What do they own? No point in doing a back squat or a bench press if I don't own it, because I'm wiggling all over the place, so I don't control it. I can't control the stops and the starts. And how do I know? Okay, stop there, hold there for a few seconds. Now come out of there slowly. They can't come out of it. Okay, I don't own it. What do I tolerate? I don't know whether I got sunburn or suntan the next day. The heat is good in Ireland at the moment, but as I say, check in on clients and they're all big tomato heads. They've overdone it.
Olive oil.
They've all done it there, you know what I mean? It's the olive oil. I did it as a kid.
Coca-Cola.
I did it as a kid. Vegetable oil.
Yeah.
And I fell asleep out in the garden like this. I was only about 11 years of age, and then I had to go to school with cotton wool buds under my arms for about 3 days, gone around there. Bag of potatoes under each arm. But so when we look at that, as I said earlier on, 5 things. Okay, the client comes into me. What's the priorities? I need to have some form of assessment, because again, although they might say weight loss, I might say, okay, there's a structural imbalance in terms of these joints. I need to get these moving, these working. I need to feel left leg as strong as the right leg. Does it mean to be a single leg? Because a single leg exercise has changed my center of mass over my base support. It's a totally different exercise than a 2-legged exercise. I need to look at their calendar and agenda. How do I provide structure into them that aligns with their goals, with their agreement? They're part of the process, but I need to align that. We say the priorities you've requested from me, that you said that you wanted to achieve, we've got to have that reference, not just during your training program. So when I look and people say mobility is important, how much did you do? Well, I did 5-10 minutes of mobility. I did 40 minutes weights. I did a EMOM every minute on the minute for the next 15 minutes, and say, right, based on the pie chart, we gave 5% towards mobility. Need to look in terms of what am I doing in the calendar. I need to have a measurement. What is the measurement we're going to define as success? Maybe this outcome that I'm looking to do. Don't know, even if it needs an outcome, but it could be like pain-free, could be the outcome. Okay, how do I know? I'm currently at 10. How do I know I can't walk this distance? So I have clients that say, can't get up this stairs, or it takes me ages, I can walk this. It doesn't have to be an external view of thinking, wait. Everyone looks on the scales and then wants to look better in the mirror. So there's not really a correlation between it. Then the question, I need to look at who's on my team. So if I'm my coach and I don't have the skills in there, well, I need to build a team maybe with a physiotherapist, align with the physiotherapist, maybe train the physiotherapist, see what you can learn from both parties. Be open to it. If you're looking and telling about coach, I'm going to ask you about your coach. And you go, but I don't do a coach because I write my own stuff. No, you're inside the jar and you can't read the ingredients. You can't smell your own breath. And I'm telling a lot of trainers out there, you got smelly breaths. And no amount of Mentos is going to put away that smell, because you don't know even what to look at. You can't see your own backswing. And then the other part of it, I need to build up the critical drivers that influence the KPIs. I need to build up what is the behaviors, the process that 1 year from now, if you do these 5 things consistently, we will look that we have achieved this outcome. And you can apply those principles. I got to take some fella there, a gym owner or whatever, and I could take his business apart. So what's the priorities? Clients, more clients. Cool. Show me your agenda. Nothing in it. Show me the measurement. Oh no, just want to be better than last year. What was last year? What was the year before that? What was that month? You got no clue the metrics. I say, who's on your team? Does he have a business coach? Does he have something like this? Does he have someone to look at the metrics? Is he looking with optics that I'm looking? Like I'm saying to you, like I went down to a printing company the other day and I said, cool, what does this business look like 6 months from now if this continues like it did in Ireland? Because it's only 2 weeks. All right, Gladys, you bleeding liar. You know, it's only another month. No, it's not. And then I'm like, okay, what's those 5? So when you're thinking about, and like I said to you, because again, is guys, you are listening in, and again, is I've been through a little bit more deeper experience in terms of Ireland, a longer lockdown, and I was resonating with Sean, and I was basically saying, Sean, The barbers down beside me used to go down and say, they had a little note up there, closed for 2 weeks, 15th of March, open back up on the 29th. Them signs were still on that window back in July. And so the thing is, everyone's expecting a blizzard. Not to be Nostradamus, but I would say consider a long winter. If Gladys is waiting for 70%, whatever it is, the magic number of the vaccinations, and you're on 10 and you've got every bleeding government crying about there's no supply. I'll share with you a story which I shared with my clients at the beginning of COVID in Ireland. Because what I said to them was, this isn't a blizzard, this is a long winter. I saw what was happening over this side of the world, because you were a little bit ahead of the curve in that time in terms of how you responded, and you responded a different way, and it works great. And so I'd organise bands. I would get guys to basically organise in terms of what can you control, what can you influence, what can you not control. You cannot control Gladys shutting down, but you can control what you put in your mouth. You can control your ability to get up and exercise with your coach, whatever medium that may be. We coach all our clients through Zoom. It was an appointment with themselves, and the destination was the same. The vehicle we used was slightly different. But I know as a goal, if your goal is weight loss, that the transition happens in 165 hours. I don't see it. You're not getting burning fat, whatever, in the 3 hours a week. It's the 165 hours of behavioural change. When people decided, I'll take a break, I'll come back when the place opens up. 1 year later, I would meet these people, and it wasn't the COVID stone, it was the COVID 2 stone. And sometimes success can be measured by losses avoided as opposed to progress made. Because if you talk to a lot of the businesses back in Ireland and you say, would you take the same income that you had in 2018 that you did 2019, 2020, they'd bite the hand off you. Every financial plan and goal got ripped up into saying, right, how do we stay alive? And sometimes progress during COVID could be, I didn't gain any weight. And the part what I'll do about the story was, Admiral Jim Stockdale was the highest ranking officer in the American Army in the time of Vietnam. And he was captured by the Viet Cong. And they wanted to use him as an element of propaganda to say, well, the US shouldn't be based in Vietnam War. And he beat himself to a pulp so they wouldn't be able to put him in front of the cameras. He consistently beat himself up so they wouldn't be able to use him as a tool. And then he developed different communication strategies with the different soldiers about how they communicate without warning. He developed education for the soldiers to keep them inspired and motivated. Some guys would play golf courses they played previously behind in their head. Visualization. We talked about you don't have to do the thing to get better at the thing. Some guys would play instruments. They would carve out pieces of wood in terms of piano. And it could have been 7 to 9 years later, Jim Stockdale emerged from Viet Cong, from the Vietnam War as a prisoner of war. And they asked Jim, how did you manage to stay alive? Multiple interrogations, regular beatings, this. I accepted this for my lot. This was it. This was my life. This was what I was going to be. I've got to accept it. And I said, Jim, a lot of soldiers never made it out of the Vietnam, a prisoner of war. Why? He goes, that was easy. They were the optimists. They kept saying, Christmas time, we'll be out at Christmas. We'll be out at this time. And they end up dying of broken hearts. So if this is to be the way, like it has been around the world, and this is where you are, where's the opportunity? How do you stay engaged with your coach? How do you integrate technology? How do you look at what you have as opposed to focusing on stuck in the gap and I don't have this, I don't have the machine, I don't have this. Remember I said, if we didn't have a name of an exercise, we have a resistance, we have a line of force, stress in the tissues, the muscles based on the anatomy and the ability and the skill that I have. And I get to control what time I go to bed at. Because the problem with people not going to work is they stay up a bit later, they sit in their arse a bit longer, The average time of sitting on a chair goes up 3 to 4 hours a day because people aren't walking to a bus, a train station, not going out for lunch, for a coffee. And they don't expend as much energy. They sit down at night time, go to bed a bit later, watch a bit more Netflix, eat a bit more crap, get up a bit later, and then expend a bit of energy, tell the trainer, I'll come back when COVID ends. You see, you'll come back, you'll be a hell of a lot different person, not in a good sense. You'll have rigor mortis, you won't be able to move, be stiff as a board. You would have changed your psychology because you're counting Gladys's 11 o'clock report. Is it 11 o'clock, is it? What did she do? I don't know. But all of this part is you have a garden and you can water the weeds or you can water the flowers. And if you spend your time listening to the media and the propaganda and you're counting the numbers every day. Like I had clients and their activity of walking, neat, non-exercise activity, germogenesis, at the start of the lockdown had reduced to about 2,000 to 3,000 steps. And you're looking for the magic pill that says, I don't have the prowler. If I only had the assault bike, I would be able to expend the calories. They had control of what they put in their mouth. They had control of what time they go to bed. They could influence their health and their blood pressure. They can't control their weight. You can influence it based on the behaviors that you are. And so you draw 3 circles. What can you control in terms of exercise? Okay, you control the frequency, the modality. What can you control in nutrition? You can write your meal plan in advance. You can shop down in Coles, but don't talk to your friends, Gladys. Okay, you can control going to bed and create an environment for sleep. Go to bed at a certain time. Most people want to set an alarm clock to go to bed or to get up. Set one to go to bed. Then you can influence your weight loss. You're responsible for the effort, not the outcome. You can influence your blood pressure. You can influence how you feel by exposing yourself to podcasts like Sean's that can provide education, that can try and transform your life, to old school Jim Rohn, to old school people who change your perspective and your paradigm shift. Or if it's a trainer, you can look maybe at Tom Purvis or different guys in terms of to use the opportunity to be better. And the stuff you can't control, which is Gladys. Because here's the thing. The same storm is going to blow on all of us. But you get to choose which way you set your sails. Either way, your boat is going to be on the rocks or you'll be in a new place. And just like we think of a caterpillar in a larvae, when it emerges, what type of butterfly are you going to be?
Love it. Fascinating chat, Damo.
Okay, buddy.
Appreciate coming on.
Yeah, okay.
I'm working all these wise people now. Find you on Instagram, and I'll find you. That is the phone book of the 21st century. So
yeah, but unfortunately, as I said, I mean, you can look up a Hey Damien Maher, but as I said, is I will go through fits and starts in terms of medium. As I said, as I coach people 40s, 50s, and 60s, and they're not really residing on the gram. And the part, they might look around and people want to see how everyone is doing and stuff like that. But again, I might emerge, Sean, as I said, this whole podcasting, maybe it's a different medium to communicate with.
Well, you won't shut up when I ask you questions, so I think you're a natural. Yeah,
you're good, dude. As I said, I appreciate that thing because again, is you give me the platform to share a message. And as I said, is there is an old school part that I came across before, and we look in terms of, Jack Canfield had a book years ago, and I remember talking to Jack, and Jack had a book called The Success Principles. And he had a thing called the public pledge. And the public pledge is you make a declaration to someone, this is what I'm going to do. And I, in front of Jack in about 2009, I stood in front of 600 people in the Mansion House in Dublin. And I said, hi, my name is Damien Maher. I'm going to start a gym, and the gym is going to be called Be Fit for Life, and it's going to be, the walls are going to be black, white, and red, and the colours are Man United, and we're going to do this people here. And in Jack's book, The Success Principles, he had the formula for success as his first principle. I'm 100% responsible for where I am today. And within that first chapter, he said an event plus a response equals your outcome. And I said, that's an interesting formula for success. And one of my mentors, Charles Pollock, when he shared a story with me regarding the same book. And he said it was a story about 2 twins. And we had one twin was an alcoholic. He was homeless. living on the street. And the other twin was a successful millionaire, changing the lives of many people, influencing what they did. And they said to the first twin, you're an alcoholic, you're homeless, you're living on the street. Why? Well, I had to, because my father was an alcoholic. They said to the second fella, you're a successful millionaire, you're changing the lives of a million people, you're inspiring people to make a difference in their lives. Why? Well, I had to, because my father was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
So both twins had the same event. The two twins took totally different responses and got two different outcomes. So during this time in lockdown, I appreciate it's challenging. But how do we reframe our perspective? How do we look at this event as an opportunity to change our responses? And maybe it is. Because again, is for those people that were working in the city, well, you're commuting probably an hour and a half less. And you got to choose where you spend that time. And if you want an outcome of a sustained health and longevity and a better quality of life for time to come, choose how you respond.
Boom. Thanks for coming on, Dambo.
Okay.
We got you on again.
Thanks, Rudy. Bye.